Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Ben Dvorak and I'm the General Manager of Rail for our Australia and New Zealand region. Really excited to have you all here today. For the agenda, we'll be introducing our Rail webinar series initially, and then we'll move into what Trapeze does and how we're focused on Rail for those of you who don't know. And then we're really excited to have a guest speaker here, Peter from Vy, who'll talk about his user story. And at the end of all of this, we'll have a Q&A session. So for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm sure everybody is now, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So please submit your questions throughout the presentation. We'll be looking through those questions, answering some of them at the end. And then there's also a resource section over to the left of the slides, which is complimentary and for your perusal. So this webinar is the first out of a three-part series. The three-part series is really focusing around challenges, planning and scheduling, workforce management, and day of operations that rail organizations are experiencing around the world. And more importantly, how they're resolving those challenges through the implementation of technology, automation, and innovation. So our first webinar today will introduce our customer, Vy, that's the largest operator in Norway. And Peter will talk about how they use technology and data to deliver effective long-term plans. Second webinar in the series will feature another customer of ours, Arriva. This is in Sweden, and they'll talk about how they solve challenges in workforce management and day of operations using technology. And then the very last one will really wrap this up and talk about the whole life cycle from long-term planning to short-term planning, and then to workforce management and day of operations, and how by using data that's gathered at the end of the life cycle, you can then pull this into the long-term planning process to ensure that the planning that you're delivering is practical and realistic and is providing the best outcome for your riders. So a little bit about Trapeze, for those of you who don't know, we're part of a large organization called Constellation. It's a $30 billion organization traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange, focused on vertical technology companies. Modaxo is a company totally focused on public transportation, just transportation, and then Trapeze is focused on the rail, bus, ambulance, ferry, and taxi side of things, so a lot of the ground and water transport. Basically what we do is we have 2,000 employees that are very passionate about providing technology into public transport, providing best of breed solutions that continue to evolve and grow with the industry. We've got offices all over the world, and we really like to bring everything that we're learning from a global standpoint and working with our 2,500 customers and all those key lessons and learnings locally as we work with our customers on the ground. So what are the solutions that we provide into rail? We'll be talking today and over, I guess, the next couple of weeks about planning and scheduling, workforce management and operations, and really all the powerful algorithms that go into managing some of the complex and dynamic problems that are thrown at rail organization on a daily basis. We've also, outside of that, have integration points into maintenance and enterprise asset management systems, yard management to understand the coupling, decouplings of trains, which ones are going out and where they are when they're actually in your yard. And also important solutions such as all this data that we have, what's important for the customer to know, and how do we get that out into their hands? So traveler information solutions as well. So as I mentioned before, lots of rail customers, some big numbers over there to the right, and we're focused on working hand in hand with those customers to ensure that the solutions are growing and evolving to manage the changing needs of rail organizations every single day. So to the fun part, we're introducing Peter. Peter Hoskin is the head of IT really and manages IT, planning, workforce management and operations at Vy Norway. His responsibilities include the IT system for workforce management, as well as planning, dispatching, and reporting on trains and rolling stock. Along with streamlined communication for crew and passengers across the network, Vy has also implemented technology solutions including automatic passenger counting, passenger information display systems, condition monitoring, CCTV, and more. Peter has a master's in informatics from the University of Oslo and has worked for the university in Oslo and Uninet, which is the academic network in Norway. He has also worked for Hewlett-Packard and for 12 years as CIO of one of Norway's major publishing companies. So we're really excited to have Peter take the time to speak to all of you today. And I'll now hand it over to Peter so he can start on the next slides. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Ben. I'm not the IT manager anymore. I'm just doing a special advisory position. I'm going to talk to you about how Vy is using IT to improve planning and operations of the passenger rail service in Norway and Sweden. As Ben said, my background is from IT, and my focus while I've been working for the railway has been to use IT to improve planning and operations. I'm operating in the gap between the railway professionals and the IT professionals. That is two quite different cultures and with very distinct languages. And I learned quite a lot about the railway over the years. So I'm going to talk about the challenges before I go on to the planning and operations part of it. And lately, but not last but not least important, is how we use that data further on in the processes. Just about the Vy group, it's well, one of the largest transport groups in Norway and Sweden. It's owned by the Norwegian government, but operates in a competitive market in both rail and bus. And I'll concentrate on the rail passenger service, but we have the same systems available for the freight company as well. So I'll start with the challenges. So Norway is a very nice country, beautiful nature, as is Sweden. We have some challenges up in the mountains, and we run in the high mountains, and sometimes we don't run in the high mountains. We are occasionally closed due to the weather conditions. But the winter is not just closing down. It also brings wear and tear on the rolling stock and on the infrastructure. We have some old and rough tunnels that add more than just charm to the operation. And on top of that, most of the infrastructure is single track and with very few alternative routes. So we need to plan for all of this. We know it's going to happen, and we have to have the plans properly in place. This picture is not a joke. This is, well, it's often worse, but then you can't make a photo of it. The station is 1,200 meters above sea level on the line between Oslo and Bergen. It's about 60 degrees north, so it's tough. By the way, the only transportation into this place is by rail. There is no roads going in. And whatever conditions the passenger cell wants the trains to run. But Norway and Sweden is not just mountains and snow, it's also urban areas. In this picture is from Oslo Central Station. And most people, of course, live in the urban areas. Our region is, well, on the opposite side of the globe compared to you. It's has railway lines going beyond the Arctic Circle, and we try now to operate Vy as a common brand in both countries and getting it together. It's about a little more than 15 million people living in this marked area. It's a similar language and culture, but with a different history and traditions. So this is what the Oslo area looks like. Stockholm is quite similar, and we also have similar around other cities. Oslo is a modern city. with more than 1 million people in the urban area and about 2 million in the longer regions. And the space in Oslo is very limited by the fjord and the surrounding hills. And so many of the people live outside the immediate urban area, where it's also cheaper housing. And that makes the railway important. The newer lines are now operating in 200 kilometers an hour, so it makes it quite convenient to get into the city. The map shows in the center here where all the lines comes together to Oslo Central Station, and then we have a tunnel going through the city to handle the rush hours. And the highways are congested as well, so we need more capacity if we want to grow in the city. So the trapeze products we use from Signature Rail in York can be handled. They can handle a variety of planning scenarios. You have the business as usual, which in general can be done by pen and paper if you're a small operation. But then you have the contingency situation, which always happens. You have the special services, and you have the emergency services that is needed when things happen, and you have to plan for them. We have to close down part of the railway quite frequently to do maintenance to make sure that the lines are working, and we're trying to make a plan for both the maintenance and how we operate the traffic while it's closed. But we have problems getting regular buses and private cars to just handle the rail traffic when we close down. So the summer vacation has been a very popular period to do all the work. We also need to have plans in place when major eruptions happen, and so we can get the situation back under control quickly. I'll come back to that. And we need systems supporting all the pieces so we can collect data from the trains and from the infrastructure and see what we have. We have passenger counting on board the newer trains so that we can see how many people are on board, and we can also use that data to predict how many people would be on the trains. And we want to make automatic reports gathered for all of this to get it all running. I guess this slide shows the workflow through how the plans are made. We interact with the infrastructure owners, that is getting the right track allocation in place, having the sections up and the train routes to run, and eventually come up with a common timetable that can be used by all the operators, both in passenger and freight, and where they have time also to do maintenance of the road tracks inside of that. From that, we put up a rolling stock plan, and then we make the tasks and duties needed to be done for the crew. We then, just before operation, we pull that over to a new system that is doing the real-time operation going forward from there. I guess this is pretty much the same in any railway, really. The long-term planning, this slide is showing how these products are tied together. We use train plan, as I said, to keep the timetable up and make the timetable. And we do the maintenance, and there's data going back and forth to the infrastructure to have this running. We try to automate as much as possible and are constantly doing improvements. This screenshot is actually from the freight company owned by Vy, called Cargonet, running in both Norway and Sweden. And the line here is running from Oslo up to Narvik through the Swedish infrastructure. It uses about 27 hours to get there. and it carries, well, most necessities up north, and then he comes back with fish. This just shows a very simple roster for rolling stock running, and you can see Saturday going into weekdays, back to Sunday going back, and then to Saturday, back to Sunday, and how this is sort of doing. You need to balance this to get things running, but that's pretty obvious. Emergency scenarios. We need to plan for everything when it's not running according to the regular plan, and we make those plans up ahead so that we know that when there's a short cut down at a given point, we know what to do. And we have contingency plans both with the infrastructure and with the bus companies. We have agreements so that we can get the buses in place quickly and have that doing. The goal is actually to automate the replanning and get things done. And to do that, we need all the plans in place, and we need to make it run. So we need a short-term plan and how to do that in a quick way. So this shows how the operational system tied together. This one shows a very interesting piece of software that we made in very, very close collaboration with Signature Rail in York. It shows the rosters that comes from Resource Plan, and it assigns the physical train sets to each of these rosters. The little green lines underneath is the physical rolling stock that is actually operating that schedule, and you can see all the work's done, and you can see also bits and pieces in between in the reddish color. That is all the tasks that has to be done while in between the train services. Sometimes you need to fill diesel, less and less, thankfully. You need to empty the toilet tanks. You need to fill up with fresh water. You have to having catering supplies, all the supplies and needs coming in. You need time for cleaning and shunting and parking. And if we are to succeed with automation on this, we need all these plans in place so that when something happens, we don't lose out on these other plans. Resource Manager is, by the way, a web application that is run on Windows, and it can also run on a Mac and Linux. And all the program maintenance is done once on the server, and it makes it so much easier to run than have things installed on the Windows computer. So we can select specific rolling stock groups. We can there's quite heavy, quite strong search capabilities. We can see how a few days ahead and a few days back in the plans to see how things are going. We can also change the composition of the unit, either run it as a single or a multiple. We also operate local haul trains with multiple wagons in between them, and we need to be able to do that as things are changing. We can make ad hoc changes to the trains, and we can adjust the timetable. We can also make a complete new timetable put into there, which is normally for moving empty trains to the yard or maintenance. So Resource Manager has become a very capable and effective tool for the operation centers, both in Norway and Sweden. And we've been able to implement that in both places. We also have a view that you can sort of roll in a small little piece and see the maintenance targets for all units. We're also getting in all the faults, and we get warnings in the rosters when a rolling stock are due to maintenance for some reason, but whether it's kilometers or days or whatever, we can see it. So we don't run with effective rolling stock out in the operation. So that is coming from the maintenance system and with interfaces into that. The train graph is showing how the trains are supposed to go and show all the crossings. Very important on single track lines. You can see, and this actually shows interactively the delays on the train. So you have one actual line here and the less viewable line, which is the actual scheduling time. So you can see when things gets delayed, you can see on this. It shows the train graph north of Oslo Airport and get both views on that. And you can turn off and see only the real time or only the plan, whatever you want. And even more important, you can actually use the train graph to split and turn the trains, which is something sometimes needed if you have a disruption. Try to mark that out here in making a simple little disruption where we turn around the trains and maintain services on both sides, and then get buses in between to help the passengers. So we also operate with sort of a one source approach. Never rekey your data. Have them once and share them. We use all of these data over and over again, but with a common source, that is. So we have these systems I've been talking about in the center here, the train plan, the resource manager, and the rolling stock register, which is sort of where we keep the common data for all of them. Those data are available out on crew devices. It exchanges data with the maintenance system at the day of operation, and also it goes out to the passenger information systems on board the trains and on the stations. And of course, it gives them overview to the operation center and gives them the way of operating and doing changes as needed. Just to mention that, one thing we've been working hard with is to limit the amount of telephones being used and our reliability on telephones. Of course, you don't get rid of the telephone, but we exchange as much data as possible between the operations and the crew and the infrastructure in data, so that we don't have to call in all the other stuff. We only use that for the important things and not the trivia. We have made, well, about almost 10 years ago, we made the web services around these and makes it easy to get all of these data out to the maintenance system. Besides the errors and stuff we're getting out of them, we're also exchanging the number of kilometers that we've been running so that can be counted into the system. This shows the rolling stock register and how those data flows through out from and joins up in the services part. PAO actually stands for planning and operating. And then all the other systems are getting the data out from the systems that way. Been a very good strategy. Then we are providing the data to our web applications. We started making those back in the days of the iPhone 3. And of course also, they of course also works on Android phones. So the good thing is it's also working on a regular PC or a Mac or what have you. And it's the same data. It's visible on any platform that has a web browser, really. And you can also get all sort of data combined together up to the viewer. We also recently made an Android app for the driver's tablets, also works for the conductors and guards on board the trains. So this is just a screen dump that shows how that is working on the tablets. And the aim is to collect everything needed into one place so that they make it easier for them to sort of concentrate and making it easier to just both find and use the data. And we have the operation view, which is quite different. The operation centers have a view like this, showing where all the trains are and working on the line. This one is from Oslo Area, and it shows Oslo Central Station to the left and all the lines going out from there to the right. And it's the same data from the same source, but shown in a map. And by clicking on the train, you can get more information about the route, where it's running, the rosters, the train composition, all of that is coming up. And you can also, by clicking on the train and selecting who you want to call, you can put up a phone call directly from the operations center out to the train in 2 clicks. And of course, the most important is to keep the passengers informed in all possible ways and platforms and where you have them. So we use the same data sources all over again to inform the passengers on what's happening, whether it's on displays, whether it's on mobile phones, whether it's in apps or on web pages. And of course, tailor that to the passengers' needs and where they want. When there are disruptions in the traffic, correct and timely information is extremely important. And you can come away with some mishaps if you manage to inform correctly. So to wrap it up a little bit, it's important to have all types of transport and everything into your plan and communicate that to the passengers in advance. And the data is used and shared by many systems, but it's one source to ensure consistency throughout. And you take it from the original source when it's possible. And the software solution flexes with your operation, can handle complex planning scenarios and make all of this happen. It's not an easy path. It takes time and dedicated people to do it. And hopefully you have that. The aim is not to learn IT, but it's how to use the tools to be able to complete the job in the shortest possible time with the best possible results. And use all the sources available. So, that was my presentation. And then over to Ben.
Thanks, Peter. I'll join you now for some questions. So, first of all, that's thank you so much for presenting that. I know you're in Sweden now, so the V network, that actually runs into Sweden a little bit as well, or you do some work for Sweden?
Yep, we're taking over an operation up here. They're actually running the night trains from Stockholm to Narvik and Stockholm to Luleå. So we're starting that on the 13th of December as the timetable changes.
The weather isn't quite as much as the non-joking picture that you showed there, is it? It's not quite there, but probably
in a few months it will be. It's always snow and ice up here, and they have a very tough winter. It just dipped below 0 today.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's for all the Australians. That's something relatively new, I think, to most of the people listening. And then this video is going to broadcast, so I'm sure there's many people that can relate to that. So I'm just as the questions start populating for me here, there's obviously, there's so many moving pieces that you took us through. You have pieces of data flowing through different departments, and then rolling stock moving around with crew that needs to be assigned, and everything sort of then flows down to the passenger. I noticed there was one slide there where you had all of these systems in your planning and operations box, but then that all flew out to your map and out to your passenger information displays and everything like that. So you've really engineered quite an amazing solution that's innovative, that sort of allows for this flow to be relatively automated throughout the process. That's fantastic. Can you remember, Peter, a time where the railway was operating without technology in place, without technology for planning of long and short timetables and resources, or too young to remember that?
Yeah, well, when I started doing the basic systems which is now known as Trapeze or Signature Rail, was in place, but in very old versions compared to today. So they moved a long way. But I have a former colleague who went over to a competing railway company, and we met again, and he said, well, it's like moving 10 years back in time. So it's big variation here as well, what it is. We've been lucky, we've been having the possibility to use the money to get where we are today. And we've also been able to implement all of that in Sweden quite efficiently.
Yeah, and so it's been a long time. I think you've had train plan in place since when?
Train plan, I think, was back in the early 90s, actually. The first rudimentary bits and pieces of train plan. And then the resource plan was made on top of that. And then we had a Windows version of Resource Manager. And then from 2006, 2007, we've been 16, 17. We've been running that on the web version. So that's sort of really came up to really good speed.
Okay, well, so I've got a few questions. Obviously, I think many of them are coming up related to technology. So I'll start walking you through those. I guess the first one that we'll touch on here is, how has the introduction of the planning system at Vy impacted the operation the most? So how has the introduction of the planning system at Vy impacted the operation the most?
I think having the ability to have the overview and see where things are and see the plans and have the visual picture of things has been important. But it also made the operation center more efficient. So we don't need to man up that hard in the weekends and nights and things like that, which means that those who work there don't have to work as many nights and weekend shifts as they used to. So it's been more effective. So outside the rush hours, we can handle the systems more efficiently by just having the right tools in place.
And how would you say that the system achieves that outcome?
Automation is the key to get there. We're not finished with the automation. There are still lots of things to do. But we have many of the business rules and the things that needs to be done is now pre-configured into the systems, so that when there is a disruption somewhere on the line, the system can very easily come up with a plan for how to do that, and the operators can sort of commit to that plan a lot easier and quicker. And we also get that new plan across to the personnel planning system so that we can run that. That is actually automated. And then again, we push that new schedule for the crew out to their mobile devices so that they know what to do.
Yeah,
yeah, the new plans are available everywhere and pushed everywhere, so that it's easy to do it. Yep.
Yeah, so I guess that flows really well into this next question. So given the COVID-19 restrictions and implications, how has the system helped your operation perform?
We started to scale down a little bit when the lockdown came, and then quite quickly after Easter, we sort of put everything back into production because we're told that we needed enough capacity on the train so that people can keep the social distancing even when traveling on the train. So yeah, we hadn't as many passengers as we normally have, but they were running pretty much to regular schedules. And by the way, in Sweden, there were no lockdown at all, sort of mandatory lockdown. People are asked to work from home, but not forced to do it.
Yeah. I was speaking actually to an executive here at one of the rail authorities, and they don't have a crew system in place yet. So they can't communicate out to their crew unless they bring them all into the depot. So changing the duties about halfway through the roster, or halfway through the cycle, and having to bring everybody into the depot when there's something like a pandemic going on, although we're deploying it, they had wished it was already deployed, so they didn't have to do that. So I think a lot of the pains that are felt when you don't have technology like this in place are felt at times of uncertainty and times of sort of dangerous events like this happening. So I've got another.
All our crew have their own mobile device so that they can look up the time schedules. They can see their plan for the day and for the next weeks to come. They can see how it is. So they have their own personal view into what they are going to do and how they're going to do it. And when something is changed from the operations center, it's immediately available in their devices. So they're really online in their work.
Yeah, enabling the crew is so important these days. So thank you for that. That's a really detailed answer. Moving into the next question here. For us, we plan both freight and passenger rail on the network. Is it possible to plan both within a single system?
Yeah, it's possible. We have the system up for the freight company, but we only plan the locomotives because they have quite a sophisticated planning for the wagons in place already. So we're looking at how to integrate back and forth between those. And so yeah, but you can easily use all of this for freight as well as passenger rail. And well, mind you, the system don't know what kind of cargo you're carrying, whether that's people or it's goods.
Yeah, different needs of people and goods, though, and if you have stalls on one, it's probably a little bit different than stalls and disruptions on another.
Yeah, well, the good thing about passenger trains is that the cargo leaves the train by themselves. Whereas on the freight train, you have to get into the depot and unload and get all that stuff across to other. On the other hand, the freight don't complain that much.
So the other one seems to be around location of fleet. So it's around, do you use GPS on your fleet and in your yards?
Yeah, we use GPS and have GPS in all the modern trains. We have some older passenger trains without GPS. And we don't have proper GPS in Sweden yet. But we use that in many capacities. We have those maps I showed you is also driven by GPS, so they move as we get a signal from them, which is about every 10 seconds. We convey that back into the infrastructure to help them calculate where the trains are and what's going on. And we use that when in disruption situation, we can actually have the GPS tell us whatever happens and get them. And I know that the drivers are using the GPS when they're picking up the train in the larger yards, so they can sort of know where in the yard to go to find their train, because it's still online as it stands in the yard. So that's easy.
Okay. Okay. And another one here. So does the system show you which vehicles have problems or faults? I think you touched on that. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, if it's a critical error, they have to call. I mean, we can't wait. We can't sort of rely on somebody seeing something in the system somewhere when something is critical for the safety of the train. But they still have to report it in, but they call first and then report. But all the other stuff, the comfort errors, as we call them, broken seat, the broken light bulb, whatever, is reported to the system, and they can also see what sort of problems are out. In the operation, that's not as important as getting them fixed when they come back into the maintenance yard. But we can see the problems and faults in the trains, yes.
Yeah, so you automate what you can, but in a state of emergency, it still is we kind of save human to human communication for those emergencies, and then outside of that, it's all automated so they can focus on their daily job.
Yep. And if you have all the non-critical errors going on the telephone, you block down the telephone system. So that's very important to keep it open.
Yeah. Definitely a good reason as well. So in your experience, what is the main consideration when you're selecting a piece of software or planning system, sort of the next piece of technology? Well,
having a strong, reputable system is important, but the most important thing is the people working behind it. So we've been working with the people in York for, many times, and we've been changing people, they've been changing people, but we've been managing to keep that integration and having a really good working relationship. They are more like partner or an extended part of the IT department that helps us get it done. And we turned to agile development before I think that it was even a name for it. So for resource manager, we have 6 weeks iterations, which means that every 6 weeks we go through a test period for a couple of days and see that we can really stress the system again, see that all the faults we reported before are fixed, or most of them are right. So we take small, gradual steps. And being able to work in that way has been extremely successful for getting Resource Manager where it is today. We don't have to wait for 6 or 12 months before we have a huge, almost new system. And of course, something doesn't work as it should when you don't test it all that frequently. So it's very good, and it makes that you have a relationship with your vendor that is pretty unique.
Yeah, we definitely see that. So I talked a little bit about the technology that we have. So a large part of that and where that technology is due to people like you, Peter. So thank you. It evolves with the feedback you provide us, and by growing the technology with your needs, it's sort of something that we can then take and that knowledge and sort of redistribute it or share that knowledge around the world. So and I'm sure that goes for many of the technology systems you have. So, okay, I think we're down to our last question. How does the partnership, so this is, how does the partnership with your solution provider play an important role? And I know we really touched on that quite a bit, but does it play a role actually in how that technology is operating for you when it's out and live in operation, or just through the development and growth of the solution?
Oh, well, I think sometimes they're more involved in our operation than they would like. but it's a learning process in that as well. So we involve them where we can, and we saw really good how when we implemented things in Sweden, we were capable of making the plans, making the rolling stock rosters, less than a month work. We managed to get everything up and running on the planning side, and then we implemented the resource manager here in Sweden in 2 days. That was quite a good experience, being able to show them what to do, and they knew exactly. And in 2 days we could actually leave and go home. So that was, and they're still running it. So it's and we had to call York and have them fix things on the road, but it worked.
Great, Peter. Well, thank you for taking the time. I know Sweden's busy for you. Like you said, you're training and getting a new operation up and live. It has been a pleasure listening to your presentation. And, just to quickly, I guess, bring everybody up to speed with, or to reintroduce the webinar, we will be doing a 3-part series. The next part of the series will air on November 17th, where we will be bringing in Arriva, our customer out of Sweden, that will be talking about how technology, how they're utilizing technology to solve some of their complex problems when it comes down to post-planning, long-term and short-term planning, and into actually the duty management, talking, sending information out to your crew, and then managing day of operations when disruptions are happening and you have dynamic changes that you need to be reacting to. So that'll be on the 17th. And then on November 24th, we're going to bring this all together, but we'll have a few experts from around the world. Besides myself, not an expert, but we'll have others on the line where we'll be talking about wrapping this all up. So really, when you have technology solution that spans the entire life cycle, like Peter does, how can you use the data that's spat out at the end of the day of operation that tells you how you performed back at the start of the value chain in the planning process to ensure that you're delivering realistic schedules out to your riders, and schedules that are least likely to be interrupted on the day of operations. So thanks everyone once again for joining us, and we look forward to the next sessions of this 3-part series.